Imagine calling 911 because a squirrel was staring at you menacingly. Yeah, that actually happened. We are roasting the 49 absolute dumbest reasons neighbors called the cops on each other, from stealing sunlight to aggressive sneezing, and even a hostage situation that was just a parrot watching a horror movie. If you don't want your neighbor reporting you for breathing too loud, smash that like button and subscribe right now, and tell me in the comments the pettiest thing your neighbor has ever done to you, because this list is about to make you question reality. 1. A nervous young man was trying to watch a late-night movie in his brand-new apartment complex. He knew the walls were paper-thin, so he kept the TV volume on level 10. He was relying entirely on the subtitles just to follow the plot. Suddenly, aggressive banging erupted on his front door. Police officers demanded he open up immediately for a noise violation. An elderly woman downstairs had reported violent vibrations shaking her ceiling fixtures. The officers stepped inside and realized the room was practically silent. The lady had seen the TV light flickering and hallucinated the sound. The cops left laughing while the guy just stood there confused. 2. A nosy, middle-aged suburban dad was peeking through his blinds on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. He spotted a beat-up van pulling into the driveway of the college student next door. He watched intently as the student handed a wad of cash to a rough-looking driver. The dad immediately dialed 911 to report a high-level narcotics exchange. He told the dispatcher that a cartel deal was happening right now. Police cruisers swarmed the cul-de-sac and surrounded the van with guns drawn. They opened the back doors and found a used sectional couch. The student had just paid $50 for some furniture. The dad quickly closed his curtains in shame. 3. A wealthy housewife in a gated community walked outside to inspect her pristine luxury car. She noticed a fine layer of dust on the hood of her white BMW. She looked over the fence and saw the landscape crew working next door. The neighbor was blowing leaves off his driveway. She immediately called the police to report malicious destruction of property. She claimed the dust particles were scratching her clear coat finish. The responding officer had to explain that dust is a part of nature. The neighbor watched from his porch while holding a rake. The woman demanded a forensic team to analyze the dirt samples. The officer politely declined and drove away shaking his head. 4. A paranoid man living in a quiet subdivision noticed something strange happening in the yard behind him. The kindly grandmother next door was feeding peanuts to the local wildlife. The man became convinced that the squirrels were being trained to spy on him. He dialed 911 and demanded immediate police intervention. He told the operator that the squirrel was staring at him menacingly. He claimed the grandmother was the ringleader of a rodent surveillance network. The police arrived and found a chubby squirrel sitting on a fence post. The grandmother offered the officers some homemade cookies. The squirrel ate a peanut and ignored everyone. The man shouted that the animal was clearly plotting something. 5. An uptight homeowner association president was patrolling the neighborhood with a clipboard. He stopped in front of a house that still had holiday lights up in February. He felt a deep sense of rage building inside his chest. He called the police non-emergency line to report a public nuisance. He claimed the festive decorations were causing him severe mental distress. He told the dispatcher that the blinking lights were lowering property values. The family inside was just lazy and had forgotten to take them down. The police officer told the man that tackiness is not a crime. The dad inside the house plugged the lights in just to annoy him further. The president stormed off writing furious notes. 6. A conspiracy theorist teenager was setting up his gaming laptop in his bedroom. He scanned for available internet networks to connect his new console. He saw a signal named FBI Surveillance Van Number 2. He panicked and ran to tell his mother that they were being watched. She immediately called the local police station to report a federal intrusion. She screamed that government agents were parked outside her house. The patrol car arrived and scanned the area for suspicious vehicles. They realized the Wi-Fi name belonged to the prankster neighbor across the street. The neighbor was a 12-year-old boy giggling in his room. The mother demanded the kid be arrested for impersonating an officer. 7. A busy corporate dad was trying to back out of his driveway for work. He slammed on his brakes when he saw a massive structure blocking the road. A wooden gazebo was rolling down the suburban street like a tumbleweed. He called the police to report a major traffic hazard blocking the lane. He blamed the neighbor down the hill for not anchoring it properly. The wind had picked up the entire patio set during the night. Police arrived to find the gazebo resting against a stop sign. The neighbor came running out in his bathrobe looking completely confused. He asked if anyone had seen his backyard furniture. The dad was late for work and furious about the flying architecture. 8. A fragile young woman in a downstairs apartment heard loud noises above her head. She was convinced that a violent fight was breaking out upstairs. The ceiling shook with every step the neighbor took. She called the police to report a domestic disturbance with heavy stomping. She told them it sounded like a wrestler was body slamming the floor. Officers knocked on the upstairs door, ready to break up a brawl. A tiny 100-pound girl answered the door wearing thick wool socks. She was just walking to her kitchen to make some tea. The lack of insulation made her footsteps sound like thunder. The officers apologized and told the downstairs neighbor to buy earplugs. 9. A vigilant neighborhood watch captain saw a large box on a porch. The box had been sitting there for 3 hours without moving. He decided it was definitely a suspicious package containing a dangerous device. He called the police and suggested they bring the bomb squad immediately. He evacuated his own family to the backyard for safety. Sirens wailed as multiple units arrived to inspect the cardboard threat. An officer carefully approached the box and read the shipping label. It was a monthly subscription delivery of premium organic dog food. The neighbor pulled up in her minivan and asked what was happening. The captain insisted that you can never be too careful these days. 10. A grumpy retired grandfather measured his lawn with a yellow tape measure. He noticed that the grass cut next door extended into his territory. The neighbor had mowed exactly 2 inches over the invisible property line. The grandfather called the police to report criminal destruction of private property. He screamed that his grass had been stolen by the man next door. The neighbor was a friendly guy who just wanted the edge to look neat. The police arrived and stared at the grass in total disbelief. They could not even tell where the line was supposed to be. The grandfather demanded the neighbor glue the grass clippings back on. The officers advised them to build a fence and left. 11. A concerned animal lover saw a dog in the adjacent yard. The greyhound was wearing a colorful hand-knitted wool sweater. It was 40 degrees outside and quite chilly for a thin dog. The woman called the police to report severe animal cruelty and abuse. She claimed the dog looked humiliated and was being tortured by fashion. The officers arrived expecting to find a starving or beaten animal. They found a cozy dog wagging its tail happily in the warmth. The owner explained that the dog was shivering without the extra layer. The woman insisted that dogs prefer to be naked in the cold. The cop petted the dog and told the woman to mind her business. 12. An artistic homeowner placed a classical Greek statue in his front garden. It was a small stone cherub holding a harp and smiling. A conservative elderly lady across the street was absolutely scandalized by the art. She called the police to report an obscene object exposed to public view. She told the dispatcher that naked figures were corrupting the neighborhood children. The police rolled up and examined the small concrete garden gnome. It was standard decor sold at every home improvement store in the country. The homeowner came out and offered to put a tiny pair of pants on it. The lady covered her eyes and ran inside her house, screaming in horror. 13. A hungry young man fired up his smoker to cook a brisket. He used high-quality hickory wood to get that perfect flavor. A health-obsessed mother 2 houses down smelled the drifting smoke. She dialed 911 to report a chemical weapon attack. She claimed her family was choking on toxic fumes from a lab. Fire trucks and police cars screeched to a halt in front of the house. They saw the guy flipping meat with an apron on. The firefighters realized it was just delicious barbecue smell. The woman yelled that secondhand meat smoke was deadly. The crew asked the guy for a sample slice instead of arresting him. 14. A confused delivery driver kept dropping pizzas at the wrong doorstep. The house numbers were faded and hard to read in the dark. The homeowner was a paranoid man who hated pepperoni with a passion. He called the police to claim he was being stalked via fast food. He insisted the neighbor was ordering hits on his cholesterol levels. He told officers that the pepperoni was a message from the mafia. The neighbor next door came out wondering where his dinner was. The police handed the pizza to the correct guy. The paranoid man shouted that it was a calculated psychological operation. The neighbor just ate a slice and laughed at him. 15. A jumpy resident heard a ripping sound coming from the apartment next door. It sounded like thick fabric being torn apart violently. He was sure that a struggle was happening right at that moment. He called the police to report suspicious tearing sounds and potential violence. Officers arrived and listened at the door for signs of a fight. They heard the rip again and burst into the room. An old man was sitting on his bed putting on orthopedic shoes. He was just opening the strong Velcro straps over and over again. The noise was incredibly loud in the quiet building. The officers apologized for the scare, and the old man offered them candy. 16. A lonely widow spent her days watching the handsome guy next door. She noticed he had a different female visitor almost every other night. She decided this was clearly a commercial operation running in the suburbs. She called the vice squad to report a house of ill repute. She claimed the man was running a business without a proper license. Police knocked on the door and found the guy making dinner for a date. He explained that he was just very active on dating apps. The date looked awkward and asked if she should leave. The officer told the widow that having a social life is not a crime. She huffed and slammed her window shut. 17. A serious gardener was proud of his prize-winning tomato plants. He noticed the neighbor planted a young oak tree near the fence. He calculated the future shadow trajectory for the next 10 years. He called the police to report a theft of solar energy. He told the dispatcher that the neighbor was stealing his sunlight on purpose. He claimed his tomatoes would starve without direct access to the sun. The responding officer looked at the tiny sapling that cast no shadow. The neighbor promised to trim it if it ever got too big. The gardener demanded the tree be arrested for future crimes. The cop told him to buy a grow light and drove away. 18. A tired shift worker was trying to sleep during the day. He heard a dog barking loudly for 3 hours straight. He called animal control and the police to report a noise nuisance. He claimed the neighbor was neglecting a loud and vicious beast. The police arrived and heard the barking coming from the living room. They knocked and the neighbor opened the door, looking confused. There was no dog in the entire apartment unit. The neighbor was binge-watching a TV show about puppies. The barking was coming from the surround sound speakers. The worker felt like an idiot while the neighbor turned the volume down. The police left without issuing a citation. 19. A rigid homeowner association member walked past a beautifully landscaped yard. She noticed the fresh mulch in the flower beds was red. The neighborhood rule book stated that only brown mulch was acceptable. She bypassed the committee and called the police for vandalism. She screamed that the red color was an assault on her eyes. She told the officer that property values would crash because of the color. The homeowner was a sweet lady who just liked the bright look. The police officer explained that landscaping choices are a civil matter. The member demanded the officer arrest the wood chips. The officer refused and the lady kept the red mulch just to make a point. 20. A suburban mom smelled something pungent wafting through her open window. It was a strong and spicy aroma she had never smelled before. She panicked and assumed it was a dangerous gas leak. She called 911 to report toxic fumes overtaking the neighborhood. Firefighters arrived in full gear, ready to evacuate the entire block. They tracked the scent to the house of a new neighbor. The family was cooking a traditional spicy curry for dinner. The firefighters took off their masks and realized it smelled delicious. The mom insisted that the air was contaminated with spices. The fire chief told her to try the food instead of calling the cops. 21. A frugal old man watched his neighbor watering the grass. The hose was stretched all the way across the front lawn. The old man was convinced the connection point was illegal. He called the police to report grand theft of city water resources. He told the dispatcher the neighbor was siphoning public utilities for free. Police arrived and followed the long green hose through the grass. They traced it back to the neighbor's own outdoor spigot. The hose was just really long and tangled up. The neighbor explained he just bought a 100-foot extender. The old man insisted it looked suspicious from his window. The officer told him to get binoculars next time. 22. A grumpy woman tried to sleep at 11 on a Friday. She heard shouting and cheering coming from the house next door. She imagined a wild fraternity party with hundreds of drunk guests. She called the police to shut down the raging kegger immediately. She claimed they were destroying the peace and probably doing drugs. Officers banged on the door, ready to disperse a massive crowd. They found 3 nerdy guys sitting on a couch. They were playing a very intense game of Mario Kart racing. The window was open and they got too excited. The police laughed and told them to close the window. The woman was furious, it was just video games. 23. A vigilant neighborhood watch lady looked out her kitchen window. She saw a man in a hoodie messing with a parked sedan. He was jamming a metal coat hanger into the driver's side window. She immediately dialed 911 to report an active auto burglary. She screamed that a criminal was hot-wiring a vehicle right now. Police cars swarmed the street and ordered the man to freeze. The terrified man dropped the hanger and put his hands up. He was actually the owner of the car who locked his keys inside. He showed the officers his ID and registration. The lady refused to believe him and said he looked like a thief. The cops helped him unlock the door. 24. An obsessive homeowner association board member checked his watch anxiously. It was 7 o'clock in the evening on trash pickup day. He noticed the neighbor across the street still had bins out. The community rules stated cans must be stored by 6 sharp. He called the police non-emergency line to report a code violation. He demanded an officer come out and issue a heavy fine. The dispatcher asked if the bins were blocking traffic or danger. The man admitted they were just on the curb looking ugly. The neighbor came home late from work and rolled them inside. The board member yelled that rules are the glue of society. The police hung up on him. 25. A frantic man who hated animals saw movement on his lawn. A fluffy orange tabby cat was walking across his pristine green grass. The cat was chasing a butterfly and minding its own business. The man called the police to report a trespassing intruder on his land. He demanded the officers arrest the suspect for violating private property laws. He claimed the cat was scouting the house for a future robbery. The police arrived and saw the cat licking its paw in the sun. The officer explained that cats do not understand property lines. The man insisted on pressing charges against the feline. The cat just meowed and walked away. The officer told the man to get a hobby. 26. A conservative mother was looking out her back window with binoculars. She saw the neighbor hanging wet laundry on a string line. Among the shirts and socks, there was a pair of boxers. She gasped and called the police to report public indecency. She told the operator that her children were being exposed to nudity. She claimed the neighbor was running a strip show in the backyard. The police knocked on the neighbor's door to investigate the lewd act. The neighbor was just an eco-friendly guy drying his clean clothes. The officer looked at the underwear waving in the breeze. He told the mother that laundry is not a crime. She closed her blinds and prayed for the neighborhood. 27. A bitter old man checked his mailbox and found it empty. He looked over and saw the mailman at the neighbor's house. He was convinced the mailman had put his coupons in the wrong box. He called the police to report a federal mail theft felony. He accused the neighbor of conspiring to steal his Bed Bath & Beyond discounts. He screamed that tampering with mail is a serious government offense. The police arrived and asked the neighbor to check his mail pile. The coupon was stuck to the back of a magazine by static. The neighbor handed it over with a confused smile. The old man snatched it and said he would be watching them closely. 28. A nervous young couple heard loud popping sounds in the cul-de-sac. It sounded exactly like a machine gun firing rapidly nearby. They dove behind their sofa and dialed 911 screaming. They reported an active shooter situation right outside their front door. SWAT teams and patrol cars descended on the quiet suburban neighborhood. They approached the source of the noise with shields and rifles. They found a teenage girl stomping on a sheet of bubble wrap. She had received a large package and was just having fun popping it. The police lowered their weapons and took a deep breath. The girl apologized while her mom looked mortified. The neighbors were still shaking behind their couch. 29. A sensitive dog owner was walking her poodle in her backyard. The neighbor on the porch had a sudden allergy attack and sneezed. The sneeze was loud and echoed off the wooden fences. The poodle jumped and barked at the sudden noise next door. The woman called the police to report a noise disturbance and harassment. She claimed the neighbor sneezed aggressively on purpose to traumatize her dog. She told the officer it was a sonic assault on her pet. The neighbor came out blowing his nose and apologizing for the hay fever. The officer tried not to laugh while taking the statement. The woman demanded the neighbor sneeze inside a pillow. The cop left without writing a ticket. 30. A bitter resident saw a makeshift table set up on the sidewalk. A cute 6-year-old girl was selling lemonade for 50 cents. She had a hand-painted sign and a pitcher of cold drink. The resident called the police to report an illegal business operation. He told the dispatcher that a merchant was selling food without a permit. He claimed it was a health code violation and tax evasion scheme. The police officer pulled up and saw the little girl smiling. He bought a cup of lemonade and gave her a $1 tip. The resident watched from his window, furious that justice was not served. The officer waved at the grumpy man and drove away refreshing. 31. A dramatic jogger was running his daily route on the sidewalk. He suddenly felt a splash of cold water hit his ankles. The homeowner next door had a sprinkler system that was slightly misaligned. The sprinkler head was tilted 5 degrees toward the public path. The jogger stopped and called the police to report an assault on a pedestrian. He claimed the homeowner was intentionally waterboarding people on the street. The officer arrived and watched the sprinkler mist gently drift over the concrete. The homeowner came out and adjusted the nozzle with a screwdriver. The jogger demanded the water be tested for chemicals. The officer told him to keep running. 32. A concerned young woman heard terrifying screams coming from the house next door. It sounded like someone was begging for help and crying out in pain. She dialed 911 and reported a hostage situation or murder in progress. Police units surrounded the house and kicked down the front door with guns drawn. They found an empty living room with a large bird cage in the corner. A green parrot looked at the officers and screamed the line from a horror movie again. The owner was at work and had left the TV on for the bird. The parrot had simply memorized the scene perfectly. The officers holstered their weapons and laughed nervously. 33. A strict neighborhood enforcer was walking around with a metal ruler. He knelt down on the lawn of a family who had just gone on vacation. He measured the grass blades and gasped in pure horror at the result. The grass was exactly 4.5 inches tall, which was half an inch over the limit. He called the police to report a breakdown of civil order in the suburbs. He told the dispatcher that the jungle next door was inviting criminal activity. The police arrived and looked at the slightly shaggy lawn. The officer refused to issue a citation for tall grass. The enforcer threatened to mow it himself in protest. 34. A highly introverted woman felt threatened by the man living across the street. Every morning he would stand on his porch and wave at her vigorously. He would shout good morning with a giant smile on his face. She finally snapped and called the police to report severe harassment and stalking. She told the officer that his aggressive happiness was a form of intimidation. She claimed he was forcing social interaction upon her against her will. The police went to talk to the friendly neighbor about his waving habits. He was just a nice guy trying to be a good community member. The officer told the woman to just buy some heavy curtains. 35. A heavyset father decided to mow his lawn on a scorching hot Saturday. He took his shirt off to cool down while pushing the heavy machine. A judgmental neighbor peered through her curtains and felt deeply offended by the sight. She called the police to report public indecency and exposure of obscene material. She claimed the man was flashing the entire neighborhood with his bare belly. The responding officer pulled up and saw a sweaty guy doing yard work. He explained to the caller that being shirtless on your own property is legal. The woman insisted that nobody should have to see that much skin. The dad waved and kept mowing. 36. A stressed-out remote worker was trying to focus in his home office. He heard a gentle tinkling sound coming from the patio next door. The neighbor had hung up a new set of bamboo wind chimes. The worker called the police to report psychological warfare designed to destroy his mind. He told the dispatcher that the sound was a sonic weapon, lowering his property value. He claimed the neighbor was using sound torture to force him to move out. The officer stood in the backyard and listened to the soft, relaxing noise. He told the worker that wind chimes are not illegal devices. The worker bought noise-canceling headphones and sulked. 37. A busybody resident saw colorful markings all over the public sidewalk. She noticed messy shapes and lines drawn in bright pink and blue chalk. She called the police to report gang graffiti and vandalism of city property. She told the operator that hoodlums were tagging the street with gang signs. The police cruiser rolled slowly down the block, looking for the perpetrators. They found a 3-year-old toddler holding a piece of jumbo chalk. She had drawn a lopsided rainbow and a pony with 3 legs. The officer told the resident that the suspect was not a threat to society. The mom washed the art away with a hose. 38. A meticulous homeowner noticed his neighbor painting the shared wooden fence. The neighbor was applying a fresh coat of beige paint to his side. The homeowner looked closer and realized the shade was slightly different than his side. He called the police to report malicious destruction of a shared structure. He screamed that the 2 tones of beige clashed and ruined the aesthetic. He demanded the neighbor sand it all down and start over immediately. The police arrived and stared at the fence for 5 minutes straight. They honestly could not tell the difference between the 2 colors. The homeowner held up paint swatches while the cops drove away. 39. A sleep-deprived man called 911 in a total rage. He lived next to a neighbor who had installed a small decorative pond. The pond had attracted a family of frogs who were croaking in the night. The man reported that the animals were violating the noise ordinance limit. He demanded the police come and arrest the frogs for disturbing the peace. He told the dispatcher the amphibians were mocking him with their sounds. The officer arrived and shone a flashlight into the dark water. The frogs went silent immediately as soon as the light hit them. The officer told the man that nature is not subject to noise laws. 40. A suspicious woman looked out her window at the crack of dawn. She saw her neighbor in the backyard doing strange poses on a mat. The neighbor was moving her arms and legs in a slow, rhythmic pattern. The woman called the police to report a satanic cult ritual in progress. She claimed the neighbor was summoning dark spirits to curse the neighborhood. She told the officer it was clearly witchcraft and black magic. The police arrived to investigate the occult activity in the yard. They found a fitness instructor doing her morning yoga routine. The officer explained that a sun salutation is not a demon summoning spell. The woman kept her Bible close just in case. 41. A paranoid woman was sunbathing by her pool on a sunny day. She heard a buzzing noise above her head and looked up. A small plastic drone was hovering near the fence line. It was a toy birthday gift for the kid next door. The woman called the police to report a government spy device. She screamed that the neighbor was an agent sent to record her. She threw a towel over her head to hide her identity. The dad came out to retrieve the toy from the tree branch. The police arrived and explained that toys are not surveillance tools. The woman insisted the drone had facial recognition technology inside it. 42. A vigilant neighborhood watch captain noticed a light on at 3 in the morning. The house across the street was usually dark at that hour. He watched the window and saw a shadow pacing back and forth. He called the police to report suspicious activity and potential burglary. He told the dispatcher that intruders were looting the home right now. Patrol cars arrived silently and surrounded the perimeter of the property. They knocked on the door and a tired mother answered in pajamas. She was holding a newborn baby and pacing to soothe him. The captain felt foolish while the baby started crying again. 43. A terrified apartment resident heard mournful wailing through the bathroom vent. It sounded like a large animal was dying in agony. The noise was loud and filled with pain and suffering. She called animal control and the police to save the creature. She reported that the neighbor was torturing a beast in the shower. Officers arrived and put their ears against the apartment door. They heard the neighbor belting out Bohemian Rhapsody very poorly. He was trying to hit the high notes and failing miserably. The police knocked and asked him to keep his talent to himself. The resident realized the dying animal was just bad karaoke. 44. A frantic jogger looked into an open garage door while passing by. She saw a human body wrapped tightly in thick black plastic. The feet were sticking out and it looked like a crime scene. She ran behind a tree and dialed 911, sobbing. She reported a murder and a body disposal in progress. Detectives arrived ready to secure the grim evidence in the garage. They cut open the plastic and found a plastic Halloween mannequin. The owner was just storing his decorations for the next spooky season. The jogger apologized while the owner laughed at the misunderstanding. 45. An entitled homeowner pulled onto his street and saw an unfamiliar car. The sedan was parked on the public road directly in front of his house. He believed that the street spot belonged to him by divine right. He called the police to report an abandoned and illegal vehicle. He demanded the tow truck remove the car immediately. The owner of the car was visiting a friend across the street. The officer explained that public streets are open to anyone who pays taxes. The homeowner screamed that it was his personal territory. The cop told him to build a driveway if he wanted a reserved spot. 46. A nervous man was eating dinner when he saw a red dot. A small laser light was dancing across his living room wall. He froze in terror, thinking a sniper had him targeted. He crawled on the floor and called the police, whispering for help. He reported an active assassin aiming into his dining room window. SWAT teams were alerted to a potential high-risk shooter situation. They scanned the neighborhood and found a 10-year-old boy. He was playing with a laser pointer for his cat 3 houses down. The laser had accidentally shined through the man's window. The police scolded the kid while the man stopped shaking. 47. A suburban gardener walked out to inspect her prize-winning flower bed. She screamed when she saw a large mushroom growing in the mulch. It had appeared overnight after a heavy rainstorm. She called the police and requested a hazmat team for a biological weapon. She claimed the neighbor had planted anthrax spores in her garden. She told the operator that domestic terrorism was happening in her yard. The fire department arrived and looked at the common wild fungus. The captain kicked it over with his boot and shrugged. The woman demanded the soil be quarantined for safety. The crew left her standing there with a shovel. 48. A heavy sleeper was trying to take a nap on a Saturday afternoon. At 2 o'clock, a loud humming noise began next door. The neighbor was vacuuming his living room with the windows open. The sleeper called the police to report a severe noise violation. He claimed the vacuum was disrupting the peace of the entire city. He told the dispatcher that cleaning should be illegal on weekends. The police officer arrived and looked at the time on his watch. He told the caller that vacuuming during the day is perfectly normal behavior. The sleeper insisted on pressing charges for emotional distress. The cop told him to buy earplugs. 49. A panicked pedestrian looked up at a roof and saw a man. The man was holding a long black object with a trigger. He was aiming it carefully at the shingles near the chimney. The pedestrian called the police to report a sniper on the roof. She screamed that a gunman was taking position above the street. Police helicopters were almost deployed to scan the rooftop area. Officers surrounded the house and ordered the man to drop the weapon. The man turned around holding a tube of black silicone caulk. He was a contractor fixing a leak in the roof flashing. The pedestrian walked away quickly in embarrassment. If you made it this far, you are officially legally required to subscribe before your neighbor calls the cops on you for watching YouTube too loud. Seriously, smash that like button and share this video with the person who hates their homeowners association the most. Now, I really need to know the truth. What is the absolute pettiest thing a neighbor has ever done to you or your family? Drop your story in the comments below because I will be reading the craziest ones. And if you think these people were insane, you have to click the video on your screen right now to see something even worse. Go click it before the HOA sees you.